Hi guys, welcome back to How the Light Gets In. So a couple of things up top before we get started. Number one, the air conditioner in my office is broken, so it's freezing in here. And number two, I feel like a hot bag of garbage and I'm getting sick. I'm only telling you these things so that you know that if this is terrible, it's not my fault. Now that we've got that out of the way. So today we're talking about unreliable narrators. And we have a lot to talk about underneath that heading. We're going to start, though, by talking about one of my favorite professors when I was in college. So when I started college, I thought I wanted to be a high school English teacher. And like that probably would have been fine. Someday I will probably tell the whole long story of how I accidentally became a therapist because I pretty much literally just tripped and fell into this life. But at the time, first year of college, I had gotten a lot of credits out of the way, so I didn't have to waste time with like comp and other like required classes. So I just took a bunch of lit classes my first semester. And one of them was American Survey with Dr. Hall. And Dr. Hall was awesome. He was like probably 60. He looked like Walt Whitman if you like miniaturized Walt Whitman, because I think Dr. Hall was only like maybe 5'5". He always wore hiking pants, like the kind that unzip into shorts, and his wife was like 20 years younger than him and super hot. Just generally like an awesome dude. But it was like American Survey of Literature, which means classic American literature, and spoiler alert, our country's not very old, so we don't have a lot of literature to choose from, so we wind up with a lot of garbage. So among all the other things we read, very few of which I enjoyed, was Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. And when we started reading the autobiography, Dr. Hall started that class period by saying, "I want to make sure everyone has their bullshit detector ready." And the further we got into reading the book, the more we realized like Benjamin Franklin really liked himself, and he really wanted to make sure that you liked him too. So I'm not saying that he outright lied, but I think he exaggerated a lot of things to make himself sound a little bit smarter and a little bit cooler and a little bit better than he actually was. Benjamin Franklin is a super unreliable narrator. He likes himself too much to be honest. And you can find unreliable narrators in a lot of other really good books. The Girl on the Train is one of my favorites, or even Gone Girl. Lots of stuff out there where you can't totally trust the person who's telling the story. So when I talk about unreliable narrators, there's a couple of different places I can take that. And I had originally intended to just kind of pick one. And instead I was like, no, they're both interesting. So I'm gonna do both. So hang in there with me for a second. So unreliable narrators can be a real problem for obvious reasons, especially in my profession. If you're gonna come in and sit on my couch and tell me a whole bunch of stuff that just straight up isn't true, it's gonna be really, really hard for me to help you because I'm trying to fix problems that either don't exist or don't exist the way that you're telling me they exist. And initially when I started working as a therapist, I was kind of obsessed with this idea and was constantly trying to get to the bottom of things and sussing out more details and trying to get a full picture. And then eventually I realized that I was going to exhaust and burn myself out if I kept living that way. So at this point, I just kind of decided that it's not my job to find the truth. So whatever version of the truth you present me, that's what I'm going to work with. The other side of this equation is how many clients I have who treat themselves as unreliable narrators. And that's something I actually run into way, way more often than people who I just think are lying to me. And these are clients who tell me things like, I felt this way, but I know I shouldn't feel that way. Or someone else did a terrible thing and I know it's my fault, I'm just not sure why. Can you help me figure out what I did wrong? And I think with these bad examples that I'm pitching, you can probably see why that's such a problem. Because if you're constantly trying to blame yourself for everything that goes wrong in your life and believe that it's all because of you and what you're doing or not doing, it's really hard to find the good in yourself. And that's kind of a key component of this whole therapy thing. And the way that being an unreliable narrator presents itself in real life is that we find ourselves not really trusting our experience. So when we have feelings, we try and talk ourselves out of those feelings and explain why we shouldn't have these feelings, or we're overreacting, or we're too sensitive, or the thing that they did that made me feel this way, they didn't mean it that way, so obviously I shouldn't feel the way that I feel. And all of that is nonsense. You're not ever going to talk yourself out of a feeling. Feelings are not right, they're not wrong, they're not good, they're not bad, they just are. You have to work on honoring those feelings in the moment as they occur. Because the more that you're trying to self-edit your emotional state, all you're going to wind up doing is just increasing your anxiety level, because you're obsessively trying to control something that you literally have no control over. Our feelings just are our feelings, and that's okay, no matter what they are. Not trusting ourselves also puts us at risk of tricking ourselves in our thoughts. Maybe I catch myself doing this all the time. I assume other people do it, or I'm just a giant weirdo. I don't know. But I'll catch myself trying to convince myself of things that I kind of know aren't true, but that maybe I want to be true. Like if someone does something really crappy to me and I'm having a lot of feelings about it and I don't really want to have a lot of feelings about it, then I try to convince myself that the thing they did either wasn't that bad, or they didn't mean it, or I took it the wrong way, things of that nature. Not trusting yourself also puts you at a lot of risk relationally. It puts you at risk to be gaslit, which, if that's a term you've never heard before, gaslighting is basically when someone tries to manipulate you into doubting your own stability and sanity. You see this a lot in people who have spent a lot of time with narcissists. Narcissists tend to gaslight everyone in their life to avoid having to deal with their own responsibility for the problems they've created. I'm sure we'll talk about that more at some point. But just in general, if the stuff that happens in your head is stuff that you've kind of learned that you can't trust or take seriously, it gets really hard to function on a normal level, because we're not designed to live in this perennial state of doubt where we don't believe that what is happening to us is real. We can also wind up becoming really obsessed with the stories that other people have about us. I've actually seen a lot of tweets about this lately, and they were all super cool, but of course I saved none of them, so now I can't find them, and so I'm gonna have to put this worse than strangers on Twitter did. But basically this idea that other people can have these opinions and thoughts about who we are and what we've done to them. And we can get really obsessed with their version of events to the point that we question who we are, and we question why we've done the things that we've done. And we can subscribe to their narrative without really thinking about whether or not that holds true and compared to how we see ourselves. In general, viewing yourself as an unreliable narrator puts you at risk for a lot of instability. Because if every thought that you have and feeling that's generated and relationship you have puts you in a state where you're questioning yourself, questioning your perception of reality, do I need to explain this more? I feel like it's very obvious that if you can't trust what goes on inside of you, and you can't trust anyone else to reflect that back to you, you're gonna get lost in it. You're gonna get overwhelmed by it. I think especially for people who have anxiety or are at least prone to anxious thinking, we have a tendency not to think of ourselves as people in the same way that we think of other people as people. Like the way that we treat others and the standards that we hold them to are way, way, way different than the ones that we have for ourselves. I catch myself thinking often when I'm pushing myself super hard to do something, why am I pushing myself like this? Why is the standard that I've set so high? Because if anyone else in my life was trying to work this hard, I would say, hey, maybe put that down for a little bit. Let's go settle down for a while and relax and then come back to it. But it's much harder to do that for yourself than it is to do for other people. So when you catch yourself treating yourself like an unreliable narrator, what do? You lean into it a little bit. If you find yourself questioning yourself, let yourself play that thought line out. You don't necessarily have to believe what comes out on the other side of it, but let yourself at least take it there, because if you try to stop yourself, you're just gonna get worse. It's like telling you not to think about a pink elephant. You're gonna think about the pink elephant. We don't really have a lot of control over the thoughts that go on in our head. We have control over which ones we indulge. We have control over how far we take them. But if you're just trying to push thoughts away, you're just going to find them bouncing back at you twice as fast, because we don't really do well with trying to tightly control that system. So as I said earlier, feelings just are what they are. We have to learn to honor them for what they are. We have to learn to accept them for what they are. They may be entirely inconvenient and really unhelpful and kind of a giant distraction in the moment, but you're not going to get super far trying to pretend like you don't have the feelings you have, or trying to talk yourself out of having the feelings that you have. It's not a voluntary process. It's not something we can choose. Over time, the more you engage those feelings, they can change. They can grow into more of what you actually want them to be. But we don't have the power to just shut them down or stop them. That's an idea that you kind of have to let go of, and I know that that's a massive disappointment. You also have to stop blaming yourself for stuff that's not your fault. Part of the whole thing that goes into treating yourself like an unreliable narrator is believing that you are influencing events in a way that you probably aren't. Because if you're treating yourself like an unreliable narrator, it's very likely that you've been told that you're an unreliable narrator. And if you've been told that you're an unreliable narrator, it's very likely that the people who told you you were an unreliable narrator are themselves unreliable narrators and need you to question your own process so that they can get away with whatever they're trying to get away with. Does that logic get circular enough for you? Just trust yourself. We all have thoughts sometimes, and we all make mistakes, and we all have feelings. Nothing that's going on inside of you that makes you feel like you're crazy or untrustworthy is a thing that no one else is going through. You have to learn to accept your own truth. And once you've found it, you have to learn to hold on to it. Because it's really convenient for other people to try and take that away from you. And if you're willing to hand it over, you're kind of stuck with whatever version of events they want to give you. We make the best decisions we can with the information that we have available. Even if we kind of think it might be a mistake, or even if we know we shouldn't do this and decide to do it anyway, we're still always making the best choices we can with the information that we have available. And if down the road it turns out to definitely be a mistake and we regret our choice, it's still the best choice we could make with the information that we have available. That's really all anyone can ask of you. The other thing you've got to learn to do is to put yourself first. In this modern age where everyone's gotten really obsessed with self-care, which I love, by the way, and as much as we talk about it, I wish we were doing it on the same level, because I don't think most people are. But you have to put yourself first. You cannot pour from an empty glass. If you're not taking the steps that you need to keep yourself full and functional, you don't have anything to give other people to make them full and functional. This is especially true in my job. If I'm showing up every day exhausted and emotionally drained, I don't have a lot to offer. And you can probably see how that matters in your own life too. The reason that we form relationships and the reason that we keep people around us is because we need and want emotional support, and we need and want people to connect with us. But if we don't have anything to give them back, those relationships get really one-sided, and that tends to push us further down into emotional exhaustion. And that's not a place you can be, especially if you're prone to doubting yourself. You need as much strength as you can gather to be able to treat yourself as a reliable narrator. I think I kind of said this earlier, but if you're treating yourself like garbage, you need to try and externalize that and look at someone else as a data point. What I mean is, if you are setting unrealistic standards for yourself, or if you're being unreasonably mean to yourself, or if you're holding yourself responsible for things that you're not responsible for, it can get too difficult to just alter that thought pattern in and of itself. So instead, externalize it. Pretend like you're not talking about yourself anymore. You're talking about someone that you really love and care for. Would you expect that of them? Would you treat them that way? And if the answer is no, then you know that you need to backtrack. Start treating yourself as someone that you really love and care for. Set standards based on what you would do for others, and then reflect that back on yourself. It's a very roundabout way of treating yourself well, and it's a very roundabout way about changing the way that you feel about yourself. But it's a good way to learn to trust yourself more. by being reflective and being careful about how you make those sorts of decisions for what you expect of yourself and what you want from yourself. So earlier this morning, I was watching The Good Place, which is maybe the best show on television. And if you haven't seen it, I'm gonna need you to do that immediately. There's 3 seasons on Netflix and they've just started the 4th and final one. So I was watching today's most recent episode, which is season 4, episode 3. It's called Chillaxing. I don't want to over-explain the show because I don't want to ruin it for you, but basically it's the afterlife. Eleanor, Kristen Bell, is very angry at Chidi for stuff that I can't get into without ruining the show. And so Michael, who is in charge of the afterlife, is talking to her, and he says, "I still don't have a grip on the human emotional spectrum. You guys are often happy when you should be sad, and angry when you should be happy, and texting when you should be driving, which is not an emotion, I know, but it's insane. The point is, in this case, even if it's not rational, you are allowed to feel a little angry. Let yourself off the hook. Process it and work your way through it, and then get your shirt together, because we have a lot of work to do." Let yourself have the feelings that you feel. Let yourself have the truth that you have. Process it, work through it, and then move on. Thanks for watching today, guys. I, as always, appreciate you very much. If you want to get in contact with me, you can find me on Gmail. You can leave stuff in the comments here, or you can come follow me on Twitter. About every 3rd day, I remember I have a Twitter account and post some stuff. I'll see you next time.